We are now to the fourth part of the 5 parts of every business, which is value delivery. So we've made something valuable, we have brought attention to it, we've made people interested, we've encouraged them to trust us enough that people are paying us for the value that we're offering. Now we actually have to do what we promised. So a business that doesn't deliver what it promises to its customers after taking their money is not a business, it's a scam. So value delivery is the point. You've made a lot of promises up to this point. Value delivery is where you deliver upon what you say, and you do that in a way that makes the customer happy that they did business with you, ultimately. So in terms of entering the value delivery process, we have a paying customer. We start with the paying customer. At the end of the value delivery process, we have a customer to whom we fulfilled our commitments and a customer that was happy to do business with us.
Value delivery. Questions for reflection. What do you need to do to deliver the value you've promised to your customers? How quickly can you deliver the value you've promised? What can you do to make each customer happy they've done business with you?
Now, in terms of starting to think about the value delivery process, it helps to imagine that since you're creating something valuable, there's usually not a whole lot of lag time between the creation of something valuable and the actual delivery of that value to a paying customer. A lot of times those processes tend to flow together. And this is an idea called a value stream. So you can kind of take the value creation process and the value delivery process and imagine it as one big system of things that roll right into the other. I find that for a lot of value delivery and systems type things, a good thing to visualize in your head is something like an automotive assembly line. So the value creation process is raw materials, plastics, metals, paint, all of these things enter at the beginning of the process. A series of things occur, and at the end of that series of things, you have a finished car that is ready for sale. But it's very rare that that car will just stop there and they park it in a parking lot somewhere and it just waits. That car is probably immediately bundled onto a truck that is then shipped to a dealership, and then there's a series of things that results in a sale and the delivery of that car to the final customer. You can think of it as one big chain, and that's called a value stream. So a value stream is the set of all steps from the start of your value creation until the delivery of the end result to your customer. The reason it's beneficial to think of it as one big chain is if you treat it as one system, you can optimize it as one system. So one of the things that has made Toyota justifiably famous over the past several decades is they imagine this process as one big value stream, and they make lots of little tweaks to that process, sometimes really small tweaks. And last estimate that I saw is they make somewhere in the order of 1 million tweaks to this value stream every single year, and they have for decades, yes. And there's a reason why Toyota is able to build very high quality cars very inexpensively and deliver them to make paying customers happy very quickly. And it's because they treat their value creation and delivery as one big system, and they optimize the system as a whole. We will talk about, particularly in systems, there are lots of benefits to adding things like automation into a value stream, so things happen over and over and over again without you having to do anything. Automation has a lot of benefits. It also has a lot of risks, and we'll talk about that. And really, in terms of thinking about your value stream, it helps to visualize it, but it also helps to diagram it. And that diagram can be a visual flow chart of step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Personally, I find it very useful just to make a list. A, B, C, D, E, F, G happens from start to finish. And just getting your value stream out of your head and down on paper to where you and the folks you work with can see it makes it much easier to take a look at the system as it exists and either find holes, so things that should be there that aren't, or things that are there that really don't need to be there. So getting your value stream out of your head onto paper starts the process of being able to improve your system over time.
Value stream. Questions for reflection. What does the process you use to create and deliver value look like? Can you diagram it? Do the value creation and value delivery parts of your business fit together seamlessly?
A distribution channel, it describes how your offer will be delivered to the end user. And there are two types of distribution channels, very generally. The first is what we call direct-to-user distribution. So it's a single channel. So let's say I am a painter, and I create a painting. A customer walks into my gallery, they buy the painting, and I hand it to them. That is direct-to-user distribution. I am the distribution channel, and I am the one who is fulfilling that obligation to my paying customer. It's very simple, it's very straightforward. Most services follow a direct-to-user distribution model. Service provider, customer pays for the service is provided, and you're done. It's effective, you have a lot of control over the process, but it introduces the capacity problem, where you only have so much time, you can only serve so many users, and therefore you have to structure your business around that fundamental scarcity. Intermediary distribution goes back to our conversation of resellers. So an intermediary distribution is kind of like the car dealership model we were talking about earlier. Toyota doesn't sell the cars to all of the users directly. They sell the cars to dealerships that sell the cars to the end customer. In the same way that Procter & Gamble produces products that they sell to Walmart, and Walmart sells to the customer. There are all sorts of examples of intermediary distribution, and they almost involve working with a reseller or working with an agent who ultimately provides that end value to the customer. Now, the benefit is working with intermediary distribution means you can have more than one person selling your thing at the same time. You can have more than one store. You can sell into more than one channel. So if you're producing chemicals, you can sell those chemicals to all sorts of different companies through all sorts of different intermediaries. And that allows you to ultimately sell more product because there are more opportunities for people to buy from you. That's the benefit. The drawback is by selling through an intermediary, you're giving up a certain element of control over the distribution of your product. So an example I like to use is think of running a cookie manufacturing company that sells through intermediaries, grocery stores like Kroger, Albertsons, Tesco, etc. By doing intermediary distribution, your cookies can be on the shelves of hundreds, if not thousands, of stores at the same time. That's a big benefit. However, if your cookies get loaded onto a truck from Kroger's, and Kroger's delivers it to the store, and somewhere in the process, crates of cookies get dropped and they crumble, and the cookies are destroyed, and those destroyed cookies end up on a shelf, and a customer buys it, and they are unhappy with that experience, the reputational impact is not on Kroger's, the reputational impact is on you. So working through an intermediary provides a lot of benefits in terms of exposure and volume and potential profit, as long as you account for the risk of intermediaries representing you and your business very well. So intermediary distribution, this is a concept we'll talk about in more detail later. Intermediary distribution introduces what's called counterparty risk. The risk that somebody else involved in some step of your value chain is going to screw up and it's going to look bad for you. So the general lesson right now is distribution is not a set it and forget it kind of thing. If you work through a distributor, you're going to have a certain amount of your time and attention that's going to have to be dedicated to evaluating the distributor, working with the distributor, communicating with the distributor to make sure everything's working as it should, and to improve that part of your value chain.
You also lose control of the sales process.
Yes, you do.
If somebody makes a promise about your product and then sells it and it doesn't deliver, again, that looks bad on you.
Yes. And you start to see some of the trade-offs. Different distributors are going to want to serve different markets. And you may have to work with more than one distributor to hit all of the markets that you need to. It's one of those things that, particularly when you start thinking about wanting to make a really big business, distribution channels become very important because it's a way that you can reach lots of customers all at the same time. But the management of those distribution channels is a job in and of itself. And it's not something that you just say, oh, we're just going to tack this onto our business and it'll be great. It requires active management.
Yeah, so that's actually the business unit I work on at National. So there's 53 people on that team.
Yes. Wow. And it's a big job.
Within marketing, amongst 590 some marketers.
Yes.
So, and we're not the biggest organization in our company by far.
Yeah.
So just for context, it's a big job, and sometimes those channels conflict.
Yep.
Right? So the intermediaries get very threatened about the internet and the company going directly to consumers, and they're not sure, there's a lot of fear there. because the model's different than what they know. They're not familiar with the technology, and they really aren't sure about, regardless of how many times it's been iterated, the company's purpose of doing that.
Yes, that's actually...
The customer's driving it, but it's like, well, we were already doing that. But it's not up to the company or the intermediary, it's up to the consumer who's buying the service.
Yeah, and that situation is actually called channel conflict. So if you want to do both intermediary distribution and direct-to-user distribution, that can introduce some conflicts because,
Very real.
yes, your distributors get really ticked off when you start selling to customers directly and not directly. Because for them, it starts to feel like you are competing with them for the volume that you should be sending to them. And remember, when you're working with an intermediary distributor, you're working with a resale-oriented business. And so their entire strategy is purchasing whatever it is that you're selling at a lower cost and reselling it for a higher one. And that is another trade-off of working with an intermediary. You're reducing your margin in the hope that the total volume that you're going to make is going to be more profitable for you.
Distribution channel. Questions for reflection. What distribution channels may be available for your offer? How can you maximize your distribution options without risking your reputation?
If the purpose of the value delivery process is to start with a customer and end up with a happy customer, it helps to understand what makes a customer happy. And there's one idea that's very, very useful as a starting point to think about what you can do to make sure that's the end result, and that's called the expectation effect. And the expectation effect, you can describe it as a little bit of a pseudo equation, which is the quality of a customer's experience with you equals the actual performance, what they actually experience with you after they buy the product, minus the expectations they have of the experience going into it. So if people ultimately have a better experience with you than they were expecting when they signed on the dotted line, that is going to be a really good experience. However, if people's expectations of you were higher than what you ultimately delivered, they are going to have a poor experience. And here's the important point. Even if, in the absolute, the experience was really, really good, or better than they could get anywhere else. Their perception of the value of what you're providing is set by the expectations that they have going in. And this introduces a very interesting dynamic, particularly when you connect this to the marketing and the sales process. Because marketing and selling is the process of setting a customer's expectations to the point that they're interested in doing business with you in the first place. So you obviously need to set those expectations to a certain threshold, or they're not going to be interested in buying from you. And the higher you set those expectations, the greater the probability that they're going to say, yeah, sounds good, I would like one. But the higher the expectations that they have going in, the greater the probability is they're going to be disappointed unless you make really darn sure that their experience is going to be far and away above the expectations that they had going into it. So one of the things that you can do from a generalized tactic standpoint to ensure you're on the right side of the expectation effect is what I like to call the unexpected bonus. Free prize inside, Seth Godin. My favorite story of this is, has anyone purchased shoes from Zappos?
Yes.
Yeah, what was that experience like?
Awesome.
Awesome, why?
It was painless,
Yep,
darn near fun,
yep,
enjoyable, no risk.
no risk. They do really aggressive risk reversal, right?
Yeah, and I had an issue where I had ordered the shoes, I got to the house, got them out, tried them on, put them in the closet, threw everything away, didn't think about them for 4 months, pulled them out, decided they weren't the shoes I wanted, or they weren't comfortable, called them back, and they said, no problem.
Yeah.
Put them in a bag, we'll send them back, and oh, now by the way, you're a VIP, so you don't have to pay for shipping, you get special offers. So if there's any even little blurb, and it was not totally my fault,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. They bonus you up and say, okay, because you had an issue and it was less than fantastic, we're going to put you into this thing where it's even going to be better now.
Yes.
I must have told at least 20 people that.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
really,
ridiculous.
really great example of aggressive risk reversal, right? Anything that could have been perceived as a risk or as something that would be perceived as less than a fantastic experience, they took away from you and they put on themselves. Now, there's one particular practice that Zappos has made pretty much a standard operating procedure. that fits this unexpected bonus quality. And that is, particularly for first-time customers, you go online, you look at buying some shoes. Selling shoes online is really hard because you can't try them on, right? You don't know how they look, you don't know how they feel. So they risk reversal you to the nth degree to remove any sense of risk of purchasing those shoes in the first place. And they say, as you go through the checkout process, if you select standard shipping, which is the default option, the expectation that they set with you is these shoes will be on your door within 3 to 5 business days, standard shipping. 9 times out of 10, those shoes are on your doorstep the next morning because Zappos, unbeknownst to you, upgraded you to free overnight shipping. That is a benefit that they could advertise on their homepage, right? Free overnight shipping on all orders. Then they would have to do it, and it wouldn't be special when it happens. So Zappos doesn't promise it, but almost always does it. And when the shoes show up the next morning, yes, 99 out of 100 customers are absolutely thrilled, and Zappos is the greatest company since sliced bread. It's those unexpected bonuses or benefits that you weren't promised, that you weren't thinking about, but provided a really great experience. Those are the things that can help you ensure that people have a better experience than they expected when they purchased. So it pays because this effect is pretty universal. It doesn't matter what you're selling. As long as you think about what can I do that would be really awesome that I can just do for people without telling about it. That's extra, that's bonus. That's how you make people happy every time. And Zappos has basically just made that a systematic part of how the company works. And it works extremely well.
The expectation effect. Questions for reflection. What do your customers expect going into a transaction? Can you deliver on those expectations consistently, then give your customers something unexpected and valuable in addition?
Now, in terms of thinking about the quality part, we're going to define it a little bit more. And one of the main factors in the quality of the delivery of whatever it is that you're providing has to do with predictability. So the expectation effect, adding an unexpected bonus is a good thing as long as you meet all the expectations that you did set in the first place. And a large factor of that is predictability, which means providing exactly what the customer expects. So unexpected surprises are only good as long as you first provide what the customer is looking for or is expecting. And there are 3 primary factors that influence that. The first is uniformity, which means delivering the same characteristics every time. Consistency is delivering the same value over time. And reliability means being able to deliver the value without error or delay. So classic example of corporate strategy gone wrong is in the 80s, the introduction of New Coke, right? Anybody remember that? Yeah. You worked on it. Can you tell that story?
My company did the whole launch for it.
Yeah.
I can't tell you what happened on the corporate end, so.
Okay.
But I mean, obviously I saw.
So for those of you who aren't familiar with the story, Coke in the 80s did a lot of taste testing on different formulations of the product. And what they found was there was a formulation, actually a lot closer to Pepsi, that in blind taste tests, customers preferred. So they decided to launch this as New Coke, updated taste, and all the data indicated that customers would receive this. Great. They launched it, and it was an absolutely abysmal, almost company-ending failure.
The launch was really good.
The launch was really great. And that's the thing. This was the major corporate initiative for Coke. They were putting everything behind this launch. And the consumer backlash was so strong that it was on the shelves for, do you remember how long? A couple months maximum.
Maybe around 6 months.
Yeah. Part of why it went wrong was a uniformity issue. Because when people bought Coke, they were expecting Coke. They weren't expecting this new crap that they put in a can that they're calling Coke now, right? People expected one thing and they got something else. And because of that, it didn't matter what the blind taste tests said. It really was, in terms of most people's taste preferences, a more agreeable product. But it wasn't Coke, so don't call it Coke. So that's a really great example of if people expect one thing, you can't switch it up on them without setting an expectation that it's a different thing. Now, consistency, delivering the same value over time, is if people expect something to be beneficial in a certain way, it needs to be at least that beneficial over time in order for them to continue to be able to count on it, to predict on it. Can anybody come up with an example of that, providing consistent value over time?
McDonald's.
McDonald's, why?
I know exactly what I'm getting when I walk in.
Exactly.
Budweiser.
Starbucks.
Anywhere in the world.
Anywhere in the world,
Exactly the same.
yes. That is
That's
consistency.
important sometimes.
It is. It is the same product consistently every time you go in, and that predictability is beneficial. Now, the third one, reliability, means being able to deliver the value without error or delay. So think of you're getting ready for the day, you walk out to the car, you put the keys in the ignition, and it doesn't start. How do you feel about your car? Piece of crap, right? Yeah. That's a predictability error, and the predictability has to do with the reliability. You rely on that car to start when you turn the key in the ignition. A good example of this from a pure psychology standpoint is the difference in the experience of someone using Windows versus using Macintosh or Linux operating system. The infamous blue screen of death.
Right.
Is the equivalent of putting the key into the ignition and things not working. And even if the fix is simple, restarting the computer takes a minute or two, it's still the impact on the reliability that makes that a poor quality experience. And the Macintosh operating system breaks just as much, but the breaks are contained and dealt with in a manner that doesn't look like the whole system failing. And the psychological difference of that, yes, it's a contained failure. And it's dealt with in a way that oftentimes is invisible to the user. In terms of the code, the same thing is happening. It's just dealt with one way versus dealt with another way. And the way you deal with it impacts how reliable people perceive the system to be. And the more of those issues, the less you come to be able to predict the reliability of the system, and the less you come to actually rely on it. So yes, those three factors, uniformity, consistency, reliability, are all things that impact the predictability of the product. The less predictable your performance, the lower the quality of the experience your customers are going to have.
Predictability. Questions for reflection. How consistent is the value you're offering to your customers? How reliable is your offer? How can you ensure every paying customer receives the value they paid for at a uniformly high standard?
Now, going back to value delivery as a system, it helps to define or to have some way of figuring out how well our value delivery system is performing. And the term we're going to use for that is called throughput. So throughput is the rate at which a system achieves its desired goal. So it is the measure of effectiveness of how well you are delivering whatever it is that you promise to your paying customers. And it's measured in the form of a rate or units over time. So the higher the units and the lower the time, the higher the throughput. And you can think about throughput in three different ways. Dollar throughput is a measure of how quickly your business creates $1 of profit. So if you imagine all the dollars flowing into your business per hour, per minute, per second, the faster your business is creating those dollars, the more dollars you ultimately create. This is how measuring things like your value stream flows directly into the financial part of your business. How quickly is our business system making us money? The second thing is unit throughput, which is a measure of how much time it takes to create an extra unit for sale. So think of the automotive assembly line. How long from raw materials to finished product does it take that system to produce one unit that is available? So if it takes 20 minutes and you cut that unit throughput to 10 minutes per finished unit, you can make twice as many cars with the same number of resources. And the third is what I call satisfaction throughput. It's a measure of how much time it takes to create a happy customer. So an example I like to use is one of my favorite restaurants, Chipotle. On average, and I have tested this, you can walk into a Chipotle on its busiest day and within 3 to 5 minutes, exit the line with your burrito and your drink and your chips and sit down, a happy customer, and total time that it took you to order, to delivery, to payment, and you're done, 3 to 5 minutes in New York City at lunchtime. So their satisfaction throughput in serving customers is so great. And that's one of the things that the company actively looks at and actively does things to decrease the amount of time it takes to serve a customer. So for example, if you look at point of sale transaction systems, swiping a credit card, giving you a receipt, all those things, you can get, on a monetarily basis, inexpensive systems that will do the job and will do it reliably. You can pay 3 times as much and get a system that will shave 15 seconds off of that transaction. Guess what types of systems businesses like Chipotle tend to gravitate towards? The higher end, that cost a lot more, that aren't strictly necessary, but it increases their ability to serve a long line of customers at a busy time. And the first example of this that I know of, in looking at both unit throughput and satisfaction throughput, was McDonald's. So McDonald's was famous for saying a Big Mac takes, on average, 35 seconds to assemble. Wow. And really measuring their employees against, can you make a Big Mac in 35 seconds? Otherwise, we have a problem. Similarly, there was a little card, it may even still be there, at the cash register, saying maximum time from transaction to food delivery, 120 seconds. So the goal for the entire organization was, from the time the person paid to the time they had their tray with all their food on it, was no more than 2 minutes. And there was a timer. And so by measuring the throughput, they were able to make all sorts of different changes in terms of how the restaurant was laid out, who did what, how long things took, where materials were in the restaurant, and the whole process of making a hamburger and delivering it to a customer, with the goal of doing it in the least amount of time possible. And by doing that, they were able to serve more customers in the busy times, but they were also able to make their paying customers happier in a shorter amount of time.
How do you look at stuff that's highly customized though? I'm thinking in my own company, but just things where it's like, you have some things that are the same a lot, and a lot of it is dependent on the customer too. Because that's one of the problems I run into is my spectrum runs from clients that don't want to talk to me on the phone because they're busy to clients that want to go over everything. And it's hard for me to measure, I don't mind either one, but it's hard for me to plan accordingly, I guess.
Now, there's probably 2 elements of that, because you're right. The exact value stream for each one of your clients is going to be slightly different. So think of it in terms of modularization. So to set up a WordPress website, to look at how long it typically takes to get a design approved, you can start to think of, on average, for most of your customers, what does this tend to look like? So you can start to see where you're really going out of bounds on certain things. And the other is understanding that sometimes, if you're doing custom work, throughput considerations are a major factor in who your ideal customers are and who you want to disqualify before they ever hit the value delivery part of your process.
That's what I was going to add. In one respect, you're already managing for that in a respect because you've cut your client list in half so that you have a little bit more flexibility, which is currency, with those current clients. So to me, that ties it together.
I'm just thinking in terms of profitability is I want to make sure, I would like to keep better track of how much profit am I making off of each one and how I can plan accordingly, even though there's so much variation.
The first step is time tracking for this stuff, because that actually gets you the data. And you probably already have it. You've worked with enough customers that you know within a rough order of magnitude how long things tend to take. But when you're dealing with throughput, you're dealing with units per period of time. So just like the McDonald's example of tracking delivery in terms of how many seconds it takes, tracking the time is the first part of really doing a thorough throughput analysis, which you may or may not need, frankly, but that's how you do it. But you could definitely think of dollar throughput. So how long does it take to serve this paying customer, and how can I maximize the amount of dollars I take in versus the amount of time it takes to make them happy? You can start making decisions on clients based on what types of clients give you a high dollar throughput. They pay me a lot, I get it done fast, and they're happy, versus the clients who don't pay me a lot, it takes a long time, and they're not happy when we're done. You can start to make some qualification decisions based on that. And the more signals you have up front, like people who tend to be really chatty on the phone, may or may not be a good fit if it takes a lot of your time on the back end to make them happy.
Or they might be a great fit, you just have to know that
That's part of the thing.
that client.
Yeah, it's the data that'll tell you. It'll be very clear. I live and die by the data, and I present the data to the stakeholders, and they live and die by it, because it's the only thing, if you build the experiment right, it's the only thing that's objective,
Yes.
right?
And
You build an objective
yeah.
experiment, the data comes out, you make your decisions and conclusions on it, you can trust it.
And
right?
particularly for throughput, because we're dealing with time, psychologically, for human beings, time is a very fluid thing. Sometimes it creeps and sometimes it flies. And so relying on your own subjective experience to estimate how long something takes is not going to be very accurate. So the first step in throughput is time tracking. So clocks are your friend in this case. It gives you the data you need to make a decision.
Throughput. Questions for reflection. Based on what you're offering, what is your current dollar, unit, and satisfaction throughput? What appears to be slowing down your value delivery system? How can you alleviate that constraint?
Now, thinking about serving lots of customers or setting up a value delivery system in which you can serve lots of customers sustainably brings us to two very interesting and interrelated concepts. The first is duplication. So duplication is the ability to reliably reproduce something of value. And a good example of this is when I wrote my book, I wrote the book once. My publisher took it to a printing press, and the printing press has the capability of producing, if necessary, tens of millions of copies of it without me doing any more work. That's duplication. Design it once, produce the same thing over and over and over and over again. So examples of this, any product that goes on a production line, that's a duplicating process. When you walk into Starbucks and you order an espresso, Starbucks knows how to duplicate shots of espresso. You walk into McDonald's and order a Big Mac. A single McDonald's is a system designed to duplicate Big Macs. So when you're thinking about reaching a lot of people with the very same offer, the first step is figuring out something that you can duplicate. And products are naturally designed to be duplicated. You design it once, you have lots of copies. Services can't be duplicated, right? Because you're taking the time and effort of the service provider, of which there's only so much and they can only do one thing at a time. Those things are difficult to duplicate. So the easier it is to duplicate what it is that you have, the more volume you can potentially do in terms of producing it once and selling it to lots of people at the same time.
Duplication. Questions for reflection. Is your offer capable of duplication? What would you need to do in order to duplicate the value you're providing?
Now, the related concept is what's called multiplication. And multiplication is duplicating an entire process or system that duplicates something else. So for example, one of the ways that McDonald's became as big as it became is not only was a single McDonald's a system for duplicating something like Big Macs, but the McDonald's Corporation was a system for duplicating entire McDonald's restaurants. So you take the same basic design and you make more than one, and your ability to deliver value goes up because you have new locations that are all set up to do the same thing. And the effectiveness of that multiplies versus how many instances of that system you have. So when there was a single McDonald's, they can only serve so many customers. When there are thousands of McDonald's all over the world, their ability to serve customers multiplies by thousands.
Multiplication. Questions for reflection. Can your business multiply as well as duplicate? How could you take advantage of multiplication to serve even more customers?
So the related concept here, and this is kind of breaking down a very common business buzzword right now, people talk about building a scalable business. And most people, including people in the business world, say, what the heck does that mean? And it really does have a meaning. A scalable business is a business that can at least duplicate, preferably they can duplicate and multiply at the same time. If you can do that, as the demand for what you're offering increases, you can just increase your ability to duplicate or create more things to allow you to multiply the business. So demand goes up, I build another McDonald's, and we continue serving customers as that demand goes up. Whereas in, let's say, a consulting business, like for Dan only has so much capacity. Until we invent cloning, can't make more Dans. Right. So for Dan's type of business, because you can't make more than one of him, any expansion of the business requires bringing in more people with a fixed amount of capacity and training them in some way, shape, or form to do part of what Dan can do. So the scalability of the business depends directly on how easy is it to duplicate what you do and how easy is it to multiply what you do. And the general lesson here is people don't scale. If your process is dependent upon people, there's only a fixed amount of time and energy every day. That's a natural bound on their ability to deliver that value. So you have to be very careful when building a scalable business. The system scales, the people within the business don't. And if one of the hidden assumptions behind your plan is that we're going to get people to work and work and work more and more and more, you reach a very natural threshold where the whole system breaks down. There's a wonderful short ebook that I read recently called The Rules of Productivity. And it was talking about all of these productivity experiments that have been done over decades in terms of there are some rules about what makes people effective, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel on this stuff. And one of the early examples that they use is Henry Ford, very early on when he was building his assembly line, instituted a 40-hour work week. And it's not because he was a nice guy. It was because they crunched the numbers and then they figured out that in the vast majority of circumstances, if you ask people to work more than 40 hours a week, their productivity declines dramatically. And thus the 40-hour work week, right? Even things like human beings, like we need to move around, we need to eat things, we need to shift our attention from one thing to another to sustain our concentration. Those are things that aren't going to go away in humanity. And so you can't depend on all of your employees working 120 hours a week for the next 10 years in order for you to do what you need to do. It's not going to work. So when you're thinking about scale, think about scaling the system in terms of duplication and multiplication, but recognize where human input is involved, there is a natural limit on that. Personally, with me for writing, I have about 3 hours of focused writing that I can do in a day, and everything else after that just doesn't make the cut in terms of quality.
Is it all at once for you, or is it spread out during the day?
Usually all at once. So if I can get myself into a writing mode, I can sustain that for about 3 hours before mind starts to wander and quality goes down. And I think that threshold depends on what you're doing and the skill and natural inclinations of the folks who are doing it. But yeah, there are some limits there. And when it comes to doing things you've never done before, you have no experience in being able to accurately estimate all of the things you're going to run into, the problems you're going to have to solve, the research you're going to have to do, the people you're going to have to talk to. And so you don't really have a good base of information to base a prediction on. So the honest answer is, I'll get started on it and it'll take how long it'll take. You can really find patterns in how you tend to work in a given day and line up the types of things that you need to do with the energy levels that you have at that particular point. It's a very useful way to increase your personal throughput by just respecting how you tend to work biologically.
Scale. Questions for reflection. Is your business system scalable? What is the maximum volume your business system is currently capable of handling? How will you go about expanding the business system as demand increases?
Accumulation is the idea that small helpful or harmful impacts or behaviors ultimately produce huge results over time. So let's think of a single Chipotle that is concerned about its throughput. So how quickly can we get a customer through the line? If you find that a particular way to add guacamole to a burrito reduces the time it takes for that burrito to be created by 10 seconds, every single time a burrito is created, you save those 10 seconds, right? That single change in the process, because the process is repeated over and over and over again, that accumulates into hours, days, depending on what time scale you look at. That benefit accumulates every time you go through the process. This is one of the fundamental benefits of process improvement. If you're doing something over and over and over and over again, a little tiny change repeated across the entire system ends up producing a major result. So let's say that change is 1 second. Well, great. It may seem small in retrospect, but if you have 5 different things that you're saving a second on, and you repeat that across the entire volume of that system over the entire year, those benefits end up being very, very significant. So accumulation is the case for looking for small improvements that are repeated over and over and over again.
Accumulation. Questions for reflection. What small improvements can you make to your offer or business system right now? What benefits would accumulate if you made a few small improvements to the system every day?
Now, a related concept is amplification. So when you make a small change to a scalable system, the results are absolutely massive. So think of the putting guacamole on a burrito example. If you make that change in one Chipotle, that change accumulates over all the burritos that particular location makes. If you institute that change in every Chipotle that exists all over the world, the benefit of that single improvement is multiplied by the entire volume of burritos that Chipotle ever makes. Remember a couple decades ago when you would buy a soda, the can was made of stainless steel, and it was really thick and it was really heavy, and those cans are pretty expensive. Over time, some very smart structural engineers were able to design a can that was able to be made out of aluminum, that was something like 10 micrometers thick, and they call it necking at the top. So instead of being a straight cylinder, it kind of comes in a little bit at the top. That can design allows you to produce a can that has similar quality in terms of structure, but is a fraction of the amount of a cheaper raw material. So moving from first basic cylindrical steel can to modern aluminum can design, multiplied across the billions of cans that are produced worldwide every year for decades, has saved the equivalent of trillions of dollars.
There are also reuse issues as well. So
Yes.
aluminum is recyclable, and steel is somewhat, but it creates waste that is extremely toxic.
Yes. So if you're making a change to just an isolated system, the benefits are going to accumulate. When you make a change to a scalable system, those benefits are going to multiply. And when you multiply a small change to a big enough system, you start saving lots of time or billions of dollars in the process. So it pays for you when you're dealing with a system that duplicates, when you're dealing with a system that multiplies. Looking for those really small improvements can actually be one of the best ways to save a lot of time or to save a lot of money. So we did this constantly at Procter & Gamble in our product design. So a tiny change in the mold that is used to blow up a bottle that houses dishwashing detergent, a tiny change in that multiplied across the entire system is millions of dollars in savings. So those small things matter when you're dealing with systems that duplicate and multiply. So the benefit is, if they find some really small thing, the value to the company of that is absolutely massive. And the best engineers actually that work in the industry are the people who are able to find those really small tweaks that make a really big difference. But part of the ability to do that relies on having a large system that's able to duplicate and multiply in the first place. And here's the tricky thing. Psychologically, human beings don't multiply naturally very accurately, because the numbers very quickly get too big to hold in our head at the same time, and if we can't visualize it, we very rarely tend to appreciate it. So one of the reasons that I recommend carrying a calculator around with you all the time is because whenever you're dealing with something that requires multiplication, you're probably underestimating just how big of an impact that it is. And if you get in the habit of actually doing the math on this stuff, a small change in an hourly rate is like, hey, big deal, right? But when you actually do the math and you see the number in front of you, it's like, holy crap, that is a really big deal. You're not going to make the decision to do it until you actually do the math.
Amplification. Questions for reflection. Does your business have amplification effects? If so, what small changes could you make to improve the workings of the entire system?
A barrier to competition is something that you do in your business to make it harder for people to do what you do. So a lot of people, particularly new business people, get really, really defensive about competition. Somebody coming into my turf, somebody doing something that kind of like what I do. And it's very easy to focus an incredible amount of time and energy into worrying about what all your competitors are doing. And the real barriers to competition are you making improvements to your value creation and value delivery process to make it harder for your competitors to do what you do. And this is one of the paradoxical things. The less you focus on your competition, worrying about what they're doing, if you spend that time and energy making improvements to your business process to serve more customers, to make them happier, to make improvements to your business system that will produce huge results, that has the effect of making it more difficult for your competitors to do what you do, fundamentally. You can learn a lot by watching your competitors at work, but that should be a learning process, and that should be relatively short. The vast majority of your time should be spent making improvements to your business systems that, as a result, make it more difficult for your competitors to come anywhere close to you.
Does niching fit in there?
Yes, it does. Niching is basically just picking a narrower part of the market to be more awesome at than anybody else. You are the guy who makes blogs for authors. Nobody else in the world is as good at doing author blogs as you are. So that's one of those things, like, it looks like you're narrowing your opportunities because there are less authors in the world than there are people in the world. But by constraining it to that particular segment, you're making it harder for other people who have similar skills to you to develop the same reputation, to develop the same system, to develop the same process that produces the result. And as a result, you're going to get more of that segment of work than anybody else because you can prove it. Or specialize in some subsegment of that market that is very high value, that contains ideal clients that you can build up a reputation for yourself as being the person to go to in this particular area.
Barrier to competition. Questions for reflection. Are you worrying too much about what your competition is doing? What would happen if you stopped worrying about the competition and focused that energy on delivering even more value?
Couple more ideas. A force multiplier is a tool that helps you amplify your effort to produce more output. So let's say you want to drive a nail into a board of wood. You can use your hand to do that. I don't recommend it. I don't recommend it. It's not particularly efficient. You're going to hurt yourself. Or you could use a tool to use less effort to get the same result far more effectively and far more safely. And if you think of the physics of using a hammer, You're just using a tool to amplify the amount of force you're able to concentrate in a very small area. That's why it works. So force multiplier as an idea is there are tools that you can use to do your job more quickly, more reliably, more predictably, more efficiently. And as a general rule of thumb, it is almost always in your best interest to buy the very best tools that are available for you to do your job. So we were looking earlier at a software program called Cover Action Pro that Tim uses to make images of books and images of training programs. And by clicking a button, it does a whole lot of things that would probably take Tim several hours to do if he did it all manually. And the software cost a couple $100. By buying that software once, he's able to produce a result in 10 minutes instead of a couple hours. Pretty much every tool across every industry fits this pattern. So even think of something as big as a production line. You're just creating a system where the effort that you have to expend to get the process rolling is relatively small, and the end results are really great, and you have to spend far less time and energy getting those results than you had to in the first place. So in general, investing in the very best multipliers that you can buy is almost always worth it, provided those tools get used. Doesn't help you if you buy a hammer and it sticks around in your shelf and you never use it, right? As long as you're going to be using a tool on a regular basis, get the best ones you can, because typically the value of those things far outweighs the cost. Similarly, and this is foreshadowing some of the things we're going to talk about in finance, the only good uses of investment or debt are to buy things like force multipliers. So if you have an idea to create a product, and to create that product you have to build a multi-million-dollar assembly line, then borrow or get investment for the millions of dollars that it's going to take you to do that. Because otherwise, it's not as attractive an idea. But don't borrow money to buy fancy chairs, or rent a fancy office, or have 500 people working for you that you don't really need, because that's not amplifying your effectiveness. So typically the only good uses of debt or investment are to buy force multipliers that you otherwise wouldn't have access to. And look at the tools that you use all day, every day. I remember when I started at P&G, the laptop that I was given when I started on my first day as an intern took 5 minutes to boot up, and I could only use one program at a time. And my job was to be using things like Photoshop and doing web development things. And I was using a really crappy tool, and as a result, my brain could think faster than my tool could go. And by virtue of having a really poor tool, my effectiveness was very severely crippled, to the point that I said, don't even worry about it. I'm bringing in my computer every day and working on my computer, because that will let me get everything done more quickly. So it pays to just keep in the back of your mind, look at all the tools that you're using every day, and if there is something that you're using day in and day out that is not as efficient or not as effective as it could be, look at upgrading those tools first.
Force multiplier. Questions for reflection. Do any force multipliers exist in your market? Are you using the very best tools you can obtain and afford?
Last idea. Systemization, which is foreshadowing some of the things that we're going to talk about in the whole part of systems. We're going to define what systemization is right now. So a system is a process that is made explicit and repeatable. Systemization is just looking at your business process as it exists and making sure it's defined in a way that is explicit and repeatable. So a lot of times, business systems exist implicitly in that there is a process that's being followed, but it may not be the same process that's done every time as efficiently and effectively as it could be. So systemization is just the idea of you're taking a look at how your business processes exist and don't exist and how it's working already. You make it explicit either by diagramming it or writing it down, and then you work through the system to see what are things that should be there that aren't, what are things that we are doing that we don't need to be doing, and are there things that we could be doing more effectively or efficiently than the way we're doing it right now. So creating systems, explicit systems and processes, is one of those things that feels like additional work. When you're really busy, it's like, I would love to have a system, but I don't have time to do that. The trick is, one of the reasons you probably don't have time to do it is because there's something really inefficient, and the way to remove that inefficiency is to create a system. So some of the things that we're going to be talking about later, like checklists and standard operating procedures and methods and other automated systems, they require some time and attention up front in order for you to build them. Time and energy you may not feel like you have. So carving out a dedicated chunk of your working time, at least a couple hours a week, to look at how am I doing my job? What systems do I have already? What systems do I need? And how do I start thinking about putting some of those in place? That is some of the most productive time that you will ever use in that week, guaranteed. So it's something that most people have to consciously decide to do and decide not to do other things temporarily for a little while to get it. But once you carve out that space and you start setting some checklists and standard operating procedures, very rapidly you free up your time to do much better things. The iteration cycle applies to all of your systems. So you're just watching what's happening, imagining some things that may improve it, pick one, test one, measure it, and decide whether or not to keep it. So Dan, you have some awesome stories about standard operating procedures. Can you share those?
Prior to a year ago, we didn't have any. It was just kind of like, yeah, we're just talking to people and making stuff happen. So we've done standard operating procedure on everything, on absolutely anything. It's a multiplier. It's been a great thing. As soon as it's like, hey, this is a new product we're doing, it's like, oh, hold on. So we start writing, like, so what does that look like? And there are steps for everything. So God forbid Tiffany got hit by a bus tomorrow. There's still a procedure that I could train somebody else on how to do, which has been massive. And it's customer interaction. Just like, so if somebody talks to us on the website, what does that look like? They sent their report, what do they get back from me? Do they get something right away? How does that happen? It's been really, really great because it's also solidified down as a creative person. I tend to look in the exceptions, not the rules, but it's now like, no, this is how we do things. And it doesn't upset the whole world. So it's been really great for that, to be more effective in everything. And to set expectations back and forth with clients. So I can say things like, I can get that to you by Friday, a week from now. I have to, because of our standard operating procedure, I know that it's actually double whatever I think it is, in a way to make everything work effectively. And so it's a great weed out procedure that's happening at the same time. Like, this is how we work, and we work this way because we know it works.
And what was the difference between how you felt about your business pre-standard operating procedure versus after you started implementing these things?
I wouldn't know what was going on with how we were doing at any moment. Now, like, we know what's up. This is what's coming. This is already on the schedule. I can look ahead. I mean, we're scheduling stuff now 6 months out because of speaking schedule, and there's all of those things that are happening, what to look for. And it has a great emotional benefit to me that I can wake up and not be stressed out, and because I don't know what's going on, I can have it down in a couple of minutes just doing some quick checks.
It's funny that a lot of people who are new to business hear the word system or hear the word process or standard operating procedure or checklist. It's like, oh my gosh, that's so boring. That's so engineering mindset. I like to be a creative person. I like to have a lot of flexibility in how I work. And the thing is, if that's your goal, if your goal is to have a lot of fun and to be creative and to be flexible, the easiest way for you to have that time in your schedule to do those things is to focus on the systemization and the standard operating procedures. So for almost everybody, instead of being the boring part of business, systemization is really the sexy part of the business. It's how you free your mind and your time and energy from all the stuff and take a step back and focus on the things that you actually are really good at and enjoy. So the moral of the story is the time that you spend building and improving your business systems is by far going to produce the biggest impact to both the quality of your business as well as the quality of your personal life in working in the business.
Systemization. Questions for reflection. What process are you currently using to deliver value? Have you systematized your value delivery process? Could parts of your value delivery process be automated?